Abusers rely on the fact that women will be silent because that is one of the primary weapons and tools for them to make sure that they get away with their behavior or worse, with their crimes. Um, I am a criminal barrister by profession. My first profession, my profession now is as a musician. But in both of these contexts, I have seen that silence is really, really important for abuse to thrive. The abuser will have made it some kind of condition that you be silent and will have been skillful at that. I mean, that's why the abuse can take root, because abusers are skillful at ensuring that their victims are subjugated and remain under their thumbs. So they will make that silence absolutely mandatory. And there will be punishment, there will be consequences, or implied consequences, or express threats if that silence is broken. For example, an example of this is abuse that that children suffer. When children are so young, they don't know any better. I was abused as a child from an incredibly early age. There was really careful grooming involved. I obviously didn't know that at the time, but looking back at that now, it's abundantly clear. And so keeping silent was just something I didn't even have to think about as a child. It just was absolutely a very, very clear instruction that I had to abide by. And so when you're in that position where you have been manipulated, groomed, subjugated, whatever, it becomes a part of your nature, I'm sorry to say, or if you're lucky, if it doesn't. And that is something then that you will then have to actively fight and unlearn. And so that's why it can take such a long time to break that silence. And it breaks my heart to say that for many people, they'll never break that silence. I can say that once I decided to tell my story, I've had so many people contact me from every background, every age, young, old, white, black, and everything in between. And a great percentage of them have said to me, "You are the first person that I've told." And that to me, whilst being an incredible honor, is frankly heartbreaking. It's crazy to me to think that. I mean, and some of these people are really well-established adults, some in their later years, and they've never said anything. And I think that we as a society really have to ask ourselves, why is that? It's that communities can also encourage silence, and they can do this unwittingly. So they don't necessarily mean to do so, but by making it difficult for somebody to speak up about their situation, it creates an atmosphere in which people who are suffering continue to suffer. Worse still, when passers-by or bystanders choose to be silent, I think that that's a very, very difficult, it's a very difficult, I want to call it a mood that our society has gotten into, that it's just easier to watch and be silent, and I'll hold my peace and I'll reserve comment on that. If you are standing by and you are observing that somebody else is suffering, but you don't feel that it's appropriate to speak out about that in defense of that person, that suffering may continue. Now, I know that that's quite a difficult thing to say or to hear, because nobody is responsible for the suffering that somebody else creates. I want to make that entirely clear. However, I do think that we do have corporate responsibility to look after each other. And sometimes that's just by speaking out, even if it's not certainly not divulging personal details, but just speaking out on an issue. I think that's really important that we are encouraged to do so in the context of this discussion. I mean, we've seen the parallels in other discussions, such as, racism and so on and so forth. That conversation's raging on, and people are saying, well, if you're silent, you're complicit. And that can be true. It's not always true, but it can be true. But I think it's harder in this context because abuse is it's such a sensitive, personal, painful topic. We have grown up as a gender that, historically at least, has been encouraged to be silent, has been encouraged to put up, and to even be thankful for whatever it is that we are given. And so whatever it is that we are offered, we should accept it with grace and continue and just carry on. It then becomes quite difficult to do something that completely upsets the status quo. And many people will find themselves really torn. I have to say, I have spoken to mothers who have had their husbands or partners being investigated or charged with abuse of their children. And it never ceases to amaze me, or it never ceased to amaze me, about how genuinely torn they were between their children and the partner. And sometimes they just couldn't bring themselves to believe that it was possible that their partners or husbands could have abused their children. It's not lost on me that some of these women themselves are likely to have been victims of one type or another, and may or may not be able to recognize that they themselves are victims. And so, specifically as a woman, making the choice to speak up in defense of a loved one, doesn't have to be your child or what have you, but a loved one, can be a very, very difficult decision. I would encourage you that even though it's difficult, it's still going to be the right one. I chose to start a project for children about this issue, and it's called Difficult Discussions, Easy Songs. And it was all birthed out of my experience of dealing with my childhood trauma of sexual abuse. I was and still am seeing a therapist, and I came out of one of these sessions thinking to myself, if only I had had very, very clear, repeated, and I think the emphasis is on the word repeated, conversations about protecting myself, about being able to say no, about what I could do to make sure that I was safe, then I might have suffered less, possibly not at all. And I was really struck by that line of thought, and I couldn't shake it. And so I thought to myself, what could I do? What could I do? I was like, if only, if only, if only. And then I thought, well, you'll have to be the bridge in that gap for the if onlys, because there are many, many people out there doing fabulous jobs of trying to help people help their children to protect themselves. And I just thought, well, I'm going to try and join the chorus. My background is one of being a criminal lawyer for several years, and one of music as well, being a musician. And so just putting those two things together, and adding the fact that as a musician now, I see a lot of children in my working week. I thought, well, what do they love? They love music. Well, certainly the ones that I see will always love to listen to some kind of song. And if they like a song, if it's catchy, or even if they don't like it, but they've heard it a lot, it lodges itself in their memory. They sing it again and again. They can become obsessive about it. They want to know all the words, and I mean all the words. They want to repeat it. They want to sing it. They want to do karaoke. They want to do dances. They want to do presentations and productions, all because they love a piece of music or because it evokes something within them. And so I thought I would combine that with educational messages, and I wanted to start with this. So I wrote a song, it's called Precious and Private, and I've put it together as a musical resource, and it has in every pack the an animated video, a karaoke video, a song track, a karaoke song track, an instrumental song track, because of all the things that I've just mentioned, to introduce them to the concept of protecting their bodies and just being able to say no. And that's just the beginning of the musical resources that I'm creating.